Hey there, friends. Welcome to yet another episode of Strange Planet, and it's a far stranger planet than we can possibly imagine. On this episode, the supernatural, UFOs, and the Vatican. But before we get to that, just a friendly reminder, if you'd like to get a little deeper into Strange Planet, you might want to consider becoming a premium subscriber. And it's real easy to do. Just click on the link in the episode description, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm. You gain access to commercial-free listening. You also receive bonus episodes produced exclusively for premium subscribers, and you receive my monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum. Again, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm. All right, in May, the Vatican released new norms on alleged supernatural phenomena. It was a document from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, and it was published on Friday, May the 17th, updating the norms for discerning alleged supernatural phenomena. And the norms came into force about 2 days after that publication, which was during the Feast of Pentecost. And here to discuss is the Reverend Dr. Christopher Macklin, who specializes in healing abductees and others who've suffered related negative ET trauma. He assists people in removing negative ET presences from their lives, clearing homes and land, and closing multi-dimensional portals. He also works tirelessly with Illuminati fallout children who've been mind-controlled and physically tortured by ET-influenced governmental agencies and institutions. In addition, he works very closely with the Pleiadians and Arcturians to help heal and rebalance humanity. His book is History, Truth, and Healing. HIV, AIDS, Agent Orange, Gulf War Syndrome, Morgellons, and Lyme disease, which addresses the negative ET presence and how it has affected humanity. Dr. Christopher Macklin, welcome to Strange Planet. How are you?
Yeah, thanks, Richard, for having me. Bless your heart. It's wonderful to be here.
So what are we to make of this? It was a press conference that the Vatican held. They were talking about apparitions and supernatural phenomena. Just give me your overall impressions of what this all means.
Well, I think they're really worried about their parishioners, personally. And I think because the document was released, and it addresses the response surrounding supernatural phenomenon, but it actually doesn't mention ETs or UFOs, which is interesting. And, I've got a feeling that the Pentagon and, all the other military areas want to, take care of that. But I do believe that even apparitions, I mean, people have seen Mother Mary and different things. I've had apparitions all the time. I get visits from off-planet beings, different dimensional beings, and I think it's really important to address. But clearly, they're trying to basically say that the individual kind of experiences they're not really supporting, because it threatens the the unity of the church, of course. So, and they have 2 billion parishioners. You can imagine, if that diminished, then their cash flow would diminish. So it's kind of important, I think, to them to keep this rolling and keep away from ET beings, because it might distract people, from Catholicism.
So these new guidelines were requested by Pope Francis. Why now, do you suppose?
Well, I think, if you look at it, there's a lot more things. People are seeing a lot of UFOs. There was a testimony by Major David, it was Crutch, in July 23, talking, about UFOs. He wasn't given the details of it, but he knew about it, and reverse engineering programs and things like that. There's been things in Mexico. In Peru in 2017, they found some ET bodies. There's a lot coming up, and I think people are seeing them in the sky. I see them all the time. It's very interesting. I saw them as a child as well, but some of them are cloaked, energetically cloaked. So unless you can see through the veil, you can't see them. But now they're becoming more apparent, and people are having sightings all over. So, and there was one around Washington. They've been all over the place. So I think now people are realizing that there is an ET presence. And they're probably looking to the Vatican and say, "Hey, what's your take on it?" And the answer is that they're trying to debunk it. Even apparitions. And it's interesting that they really deal with. I mean, their faith is based on Luciferianism. They worship Lucifer, but of course they'll never tell you that. And it's all connected. It's all connected.
Now, when you say they worship Lucifer, you're talking about the Vatican or elements within inside the Vatican, not necessarily, I'm guessing, the hundreds of millions of Catholic adherents, right?
No, I mean, the Catholic adherents think they're worshiping, they've got Mother Mary, they've got Jesus, and the whole biblical system. But within the Vatican, which is part of the Cabal, I mean, if you look at the Vatican, it's part of the trifecta of darkness. There's a trifecta. There's the Vatican. There's also Washington, D.C., and then there's also London, and these things are the centers of the elitist, whatever you want to call them, cabal, deep state, it's all the same thing.
So is it your understanding then that these new guidelines released by the Vatican in May regarding supernatural events or apparitions is basically a way of the Vatican controlling the narrative here and giving them these new guidelines will allow the Vatican basically to debunk or to say, no, we don't sanction any of these. I mean, they'll decide which, rather than, let's say, a local bishop deciding, yes, that was the Mother Mary who appeared, over a church in Guadalupe, Mexico, or what have you. The Vatican basically is coming in and saying, no, we will decide what is an authentic apparition or something that's divine.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're trying to debunk it at the moment. They don't mention, like, say, ETs, UFOs. They talk about apparitions, but they're kind of starting to debunk those, which I think is really interesting. They're trying to get people focused, I think, on the church and the narratives that they put out, and their infrastructure.
So, I mean, the Catholic Church has issued statements in the last, 15 years or so regarding extraterrestrials, suggesting that they're okay with the idea of extraterrestrials, that they are all part of God's creation. Is there anything, I know they didn't mention UFOs or ET specifically in this latest document, but are they inferring anything further about off-planet ETs, or what is the present connection, do you think, between Vaticans and off-planet ETs?
I think they're skirting around the issue, keeping the issue generalized around ET spirituality. They're skirting around the fact that, and if you look at these beings that people see, they're energetic. So what does that actually mean? Well, there's lots of, I mean, on this planet, there's negative beings. There's also, benevolent. The benevolent ones who are helping us, there's a lot of them. Palladians, Arcturians, Lemurians, Atlanteans, Andromedans, Lyrians. There's a whole host here to help us. And then you've got the negative ones, which are trying to take over the planet. And it's interesting because part of the thing with the Cabal, and of course the Vatican's way in that league, is that they want to take over this planet. Why do they want to do that? Well, the people on top of the planet are puppet masters. The real problem is actually below the planet, or on another planet, which is you've got the Luciferians, you've got Anunnaki, you've got Draconians, and so and these Draconians are pretty dark, and so what they're trying to do is they're controlling, and they want to come up, especially the Anunnaki on the planet, and actually live on the planet, but they can't because they don't breathe enough oxygen. So they live in massive caverns, and that's why they've got this thing going on about blocking out the sun because of global warming and things like that, because they want to reduce the oxygen and reduce the plant life.
So they're preparing the surface of the planet to be inhabited by the Dracos who are below. These are the reptilians.
Yeah.
The reptilians?
Yeah, the reptilians got Dracos. I mean, Luciferians are reptilians, and so are Anunnaki as well. and they've all kind of got together. The Greys aren't, I mean, they're still involved, but not so much. They were actually swept off the planet in 2017 because of the abduction. They were swept off by the Arcturians and banned from, it's interesting, they were banned from this time and space. But what's happened is they're actually coming back in portals. So they're coming in people's rooms, opening a portal. So they're in a same space but different time. So they've got over the rules of the ban. And that was done basically 2017. I was at the meeting, the Galactic Federation. I do chair it with other two Melchisedek beings. And it talked about what's the difference between, violation, education. So, and you would think that, things like the Anunnaki and Draconians and Luciferians can attach to you. They're in they swap. Some of them can actually shapeshift into this dimension, like the Anunnaki and the Draconians, and some of them can't. But if they attach to you, if they're spirity and they're attached to you, is that a violation? And the answer was deemed not, because before you come to this planet, you're kind of educated. Do you just want to see what's going on the planet? You've got these beings that will attach to you and manipulate you and everything else. Yeah, no problem. Let's get down the planet and let's make a difference. But so that was deemed as an education. You've got to learn how to manage them with, in quotes, maps of intent. I like the word, instead of prayer, maps of intent, because it's creating an intention to do something. But when a contract was signed, first with Hitler, and then it was swapped over here with the Paperclip Project to abduct people and steal their body parts for technology, that was deemed as a complete violation. And so they were swept off the planet. They can only do it if it's a complete violation, because of course we have free will down here. So it's a pretty interesting, it's a very, this planet is probably one of the most extreme classrooms you'll ever be in. The place is nuts. I love it, but it's nuts.
Getting back to the Vatican here for a moment. We had back in 2023, we had the testimony before Congress of a former U.S. intelligence official, David Grush, alleging the Vatican's involvement in an international cover-up of alien secrets. He claimed Pope Pius XII back-channeled information to the U.S. about a crashed UFO recovered by Benito Mussolini, I guess back in the 1930s, I'm guessing. What are your thoughts on Grush's testimony and the involvement of Pope Pius XII in back-channeling information to the U.S. about a crashed UFO?
Oh yeah, I think it's all true, and they've had a number of crashes. I mean, these craft aren't perfect, of course, and they make mistakes. And I think they've picked them up. There was Roswell. There's been crashes all over, some in England as well. So I think they've actually picked these things up, taken them to Area 51 and analyze the beings in them, and also reverse engineered. Like I say, the Greys are here helping the government to understand how the technology and develop it. The sad thing is, it's like giving a 2-year-old the keys to a Ferrari. We're not ready for this level of technology and, like nanotechnology and all this sort of thing. We're not ready for it. And it's being used in not such a good way, like Morgellons.
We'll come around back to that. Dr. Christopher Macklin is with us. The new book is History, Truth, and Healing, addressing the negative ET presence and how it has affected humanity. Back with more of our conversation right after these. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. Christopher Macklin specializes in healing abductees and others who've suffered related negative ET trauma. And for over 14 years, Dr. Macklin has assisted people in removing negative ET presences from their lives, clearing homes and land, and closing multi-dimensional portals. And again, the new book is History, Truth, and Healing. And we're talking about the Vatican and the supernatural. When it comes to apparitions, particularly apparitions of the Virgin Mary, we have, of course, the perhaps the most famous apparition in Fatima, Portugal, in 1917, and the third secret of Fatima. We've been waiting to hear what the third secret is. Let me just get you to sort of unpack what you think that whole apparition, not only in Fatima, but maybe others in Guadalupe and so forth. Do you think that in this case, or in these cases, we're talking about an ET visitation? Is it something maybe sinister, a deception? Could it be the Virgin Mary? What do you think?
I think it was the Virgin Mary. I mean, it's interesting because there is deception around with things called holographic inserts. What are they? Well, difficult to explain, but what they do is, and I've been in these things, you know, for example, one day I walked into Walmart and the place looked completely different. I looked at the walls, the color was different, everything was laid out. There was you know, a cafe at the side with bolted down tables. All the tables were missing and things like this. And I thought, this is a holographic insert. Walked out, removed it, walked back in, it was back to normal. So what does that actually mean? What they're doing is putting, you know, if you want to look at it like a computer, a bit of software in your surrounding to alter it, you know. So, and I've been in a couple of them. For example, I also flew into Tampa once. It was 5 p.m. I was doing a lecture, and I got in the car. There was no traffic, like no traffic, no cars at all on the road. I thought, this is strange. And I said, is this a holographic insert? Well, yeah. So I took it out suddenly, and I took it out too early because I hadn't got to the place I was meant to be, you know, the church. And suddenly I was in a traffic jam for about 45 minutes. But before that, there was nothing there. And so these things are real. And Walmart uses this holographic insert technology. And even more, when I became a citizen, it's really interesting because they asked me a question, you know, you get a medical with a doctor. He said, I've got to ask you 5 questions and look at your answer and look in your eyes, you know, to see what expression. They said, have you ever been to a shopping mall or been somewhere and it felt surreal and the whole place looked completely different? And I thought, oh, this is holographic insert. So can you explain that again? He goes, have you ever, you know, got all crabby with me and said, I don't know what you're talking about. So they were checking if you ever been and understand holographic inserts, and they're real. So
how did they know to ask you that? They must have suspected something.
I think it's a standard question because I think when you're coming in, they want to see whether you're gifted and what gifts you have and what understanding you have, and then you'd be watched, you know. And I just pretended I was dumb, and he believed me. I was very careful about my faces. But well, you know, what do you want about, you know? Well, have you ever been to a shopping mall? I don't, you know, it's not the usual question that Homeland Security is going to ask you. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. They're asking if you experience holographic inserts, and there's a couple of other things as well. And I think they ask everybody, and then they can watch who's in, who's gifted, and everything else. So yeah, so some of these holographic inserts, they can create Mother Mary images, solid images, you know, now. But I think the Fatima events, some of these events, I mean, I've seen Mother Mary myself. She's a Melchisedek being. She's actually appeared because I was born as a Melchisedek being, and I do a lot of work with them every day, doing the healings. So I talk to her a lot, but she has appeared to me, and you know, she's in a different dimension. So of course, it's an energy version of her, you
know. So we're talking about the mother of Jesus, the mother of God, or do you believe what we're talking about here are positive ETs?
Well, it's kind of one of the same. I mean, she's not on this planet right now. I mean, I believe in reincarnation, and I believe that, you know, there's a lot of starseed people who have come back, Pleiadians, Arcturians. Some of them have been spliced down here, what we call a virgin birth. It's not really. It's actually an abduction on a ship, and they actually splice. For some races, you need enough DNA in the body to be able to hold the soul of that race. And some of them are okay, like Palladians, they can come in a human body. Melchisedek, not so much. My mother was abducted and I was put here at birth, but of course I couldn't tell my father that because, it's just not with it. And the same with Arcturians, they have to be spliced at birth. So basically what they do is, if they want a starseed down here of that race, they have to basically take them on a ship, splice them in at birth and then put them back down. So it's not, done by natural means per se.
So Jesus was a star seed. His mother was human, and God the Father is essentially an extraterrestrial, or?
Well, Jesus was Melchizedek, so was Mother Mary, and that's why.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. They were which?
Jesus and Mother Mary were Melchizedek.
Melchizedek.
Yeah, and they were. They were. Yeah, starseed basically. And they came down here to do some work and help. But it's interesting. For the last 4,000 years, all these starseeds have been down at different times to learn how it's evolving so quickly, so they can actually be prepared for right now. Because to me, right now is it. This is the transition that is going to make humanity or break it. And we can see the world is going pretty south right now. So.
Talk to me about you mentioned the cabal, Washington, London, the Vatican. Are they in direct communication with the negative reptilian ETs?
Oh yeah, there's a big entrance in Antarctica and they go there very often, especially people like Obama and Clinton's, they're puppets of the reptilians under the planet. And of course, the reptilians want them to gain control. There are reptilian hybrids, of course. They have made hybrid people where, they're in the government as well. There's a lot of them. The deep state is far and wide. I think bigger than anyone could imagine. So it's going to take some breaking down for sure.
And are there elements in government that are in direct contact with, you refer to them as the positive ETs, or are all governments basically cooperating with in allegiance with the dark or the bad ETs?
No, I think there's an element in military and in the government who are connecting to positive ETs. And what's happening over a period of time is, they're trying to expose the problem with the cabal and the strangulation they have on this planet, or what I call it, strangulation, enslavement, whatever you call it, is that it's so far and wide that, people would never, ever believe it. I mean, I often have clients saying, there must be something that's not hijacked on this planet. I'm kind of, let me see, no, that'll be everything. Everything's interfered with: food, water, money, everything. And so taxation systems. So it's so big that I think it's, you have to set a kind of what you call a play, whatever you want to call it, some sort of system where you can expose it bit by bit so people can cope with it. If they knew all the things that happen, with children, with everything else, it would destroy the mental health of the whole planet. Would tank. So they're just bringing this stuff out bit by bit.
Laura Eisenhower was on the program recently talking about her great-grandfather, President Eisenhower, and how he became aware that under Truman, the United States had surrendered unconditionally to the Nazis after the big UFO flap over Washington, D.C. in 1952, when this huge fleet of flying craft flew over the Capitol building. And these were, I guess, piloted by Nazis and their reptilian allies. What are your thoughts on that? Do you believe the U.S. surrendered unconditionally to the Nazis who were allied with the reptilians?
Oh, absolutely. I'm Paperclip Project, and it was Truman. Paperclip Project got transferred here. They got all the Nazi top scientists, And, by the way, Laura's a really good personal friend of mine. I love her teaching. She's a great person, bless her. But she tries and defends, her great grandfather because he was pushed into re-signing when he came into office. And, of course, it was there anyway. And the problem is that he would have been killed and all his family if he hadn't have actually gone with the narrative. But and so they signed with these greys, the grey reticula, who have destroyed their planet. Of course, now they've come down here. They're starting to destroy ours, and that's the beings that were actually removed in 2017. So they're actually no longer here, but they were given as I mean, if you look at the technology of the last, since like the 80s, it's just dumbfounding. It's gone so advanced. We're not doing well with it. And of course, the technology is kept by the cabal, so it's not really benefiting the people.
So you mentioned the Greys were kicked off the planet in 2017. How did that information come to you?
I actually chair the Galactic Federation with two other Melchizedek beings, and I have been physically taken a couple of times. But normally, what happens is they take your soul and you transfer over there. And you sit, I mean, that meeting was over 10,000 different beings communicating by telepathy. And like I say, we're talking about the difference between violation and education. It was decided that, education is, if you get a reptilian stuck to you, you have to do a prayer, remove it, and learn how to remove it. Exorcism, whatever you want to call it. But when you actually paralyzing someone with a tractor beam and taking them on your ship, paralyzed, and stealing body parts like sperm, eggs, and different things, and they're actually even fertilizing an egg inside women and then putting them back for about a month, making sure the egg grows, and then they actually abduct them again and take it out. They were doing all this stuff. I've worked on so many people who have been abductees who have, I thought, I was pregnant. I knew I was pregnant, and then I suddenly I wasn't, and I don't understand it. Well, we do. This is what they were doing. It's kind of stopped now. It's stopped, which is good.
Can you just back up a little bit and tell me about what did you call Jesus and Virgin Mary?
Melchizedek beings, yeah.
Yeah, what are Melchizedek beings? I mean, I've heard the name Melchizedek from the Bible, who was kind of a priestly king, wasn't he?
Well, it talks about it. It doesn't talk accurately, and of course, there's a lot of misinformation in the Bible. I mean, there's a lot of a lot of books that have been kept out, like the Keys of Enoch, yeah, and so it does talk about it a little bit, but not really in depth. Melchizedek beings live in the ultimate dimension, which is the infinite dimension. There's infinite dimensions, there's infinite timelines, and people don't realize. I think, oh, there's only nine dimensions. Well, there's not. And they live in the ultimate dimension. And when this third dimensional world was created, they were involved in part of the creation. Obviously, prime creator, whatever you call God, created the whole thing. And they were basically chosen to keep an eye on the place. So that means that a Melchizedek being has to be born periodically, to actually police what's down here and try and help when, things go south. And of course, the whole thing's gone pretty south. And the problem is, this goes with all starseeds, when it goes south, even prime creator, God of all it is, can't get involved, nor can any of the off-planet beings unless they're invited, because of the free will element down here. So that's why there's so many starseeds. I think there's about 400 million starseeds born at this time to pull from the ether's help down here so we can do some work and, help as many people as possible transition and turn to the light effectively.
All right, Christopher, we'll take another time out. We'll come back, and I want to get further into this governing spiritual ET body that's watching over the earth. Back with more of our conversation right after these. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship. Enjoy the complete unedited episodes and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. The Reverend Dr. Christopher Macklin, UFO expert, and discussing the UFO ET phenomena, the supernatural, and the Vatican cover-up on the subject. And again, his brand new book is History, Truth, and Healing, HIV/AIDS, Agent Orange, Gulf War Syndrome, Morgellons, and Lyme disease. All right, so you mentioned that you have chaired some of the meetings of this governing spiritual ET body.
That's right, yeah. And there's so many ETs involved because of free will. You know, it has to be agreed by various factions of ET presences in this galaxy, you know, and also to make sure, of course, that the Earth stays balanced, but not interfere with free will. And that's very important. So
is there a name for this? I've heard things like, the Council of Nine. I've heard the, well, I've heard different, the Federation of, I can't think of the names, the different names I've heard, but what is the actual name of this governing ET body?
It's just called the Galactic Federation.
Galactic Federation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could add of light if you want, but it's just the Galactic Federation, you know, and it gets involved with other planets as well when things are going south. So yeah.
And how does this meeting take place? Telepathically? Are you transported somewhere physically? How does it happen?
I have been transported physically. They do wipe your memory quite a bit, but you know, when you meditate, you can see. But also, they take your soul. So what happens is, I remember they had a meeting, and normally they give you like 10 minutes notice so you can lie on the bed. And then, of course, when your soul's not in your body, you're in a coma, you know, because there's no soul. It goes on the umbilical cord, you go to the other place, and it can be like a 3-day meeting there. But of course, it's about 5 or 10 minutes because there's no time there. And I remember one day they took me and I wasn't quite at the bed and I was collapsed on the floor. And my wife, oh my God, he's had a stroke. And now it's the Galactic Federation. I forgot, you know, and I was out for 10 minutes and just came back, you know, so it's amazing.
And what is it, like a big parliament? Do you vote? How many members in this Galactic Federation? How many representatives?
The one with the Greys was over 10,000. It was a lot. And yeah, and they just discuss it, use telepathy, and then they kind of vote, okay, so who agrees that this was a violation? If it's a violation, you can interfere. If it's an education, you can't. And so it was deemed a violation because the government has no business in signing a document to say that they can steal your body parts, free will. It doesn't work like that, you know. So,
but they're also, I mean, are they mainly concerned, the Galactic Federation, with the influence of other extraterrestrial civilizations on upon the Earth, or are they also involving themselves in, let's say, some of the treaties and between governments here on Earth and, let's call them, bad ETs? Are they getting involved in those, trying to disrupt those?
well, they get involved with them. Again, there's free will, so it's up to the human race to wake up and get some help. And that's the whole point about, you know, it was deemed, 400 million, you know, basically star seeds, of which a lot of them have been hijacked. You know, star seeds are really, really relentlessly attacked by negative ETs, including myself. You know, 2 days after I was born, I had 8 strokes. then at the age of 4, I burnt my back so bad in hospital for a year. So by the time I was 5, I've been in hospital for 2 years, and it's carried on. Things have happened during my life that luckily I've got the intuition to say, I better not go at this time, otherwise there'll be a problem. But when you get to a point where you've taken your power back, it's very interesting, and I call, whatever you call God, it doesn't really matter. All it is, prime creator, universe. But when you have absolute faith, they can't touch you. But it takes a lot to get absolute faith. You've got to really process all your drama of this lifetime, and then, really take your power back. And once you've taken your power back, nothing ever happens. You then basically surrender to God. God's got my back. I don't have to worry. And once you have that faith, absolute faith, you can create the reality that nothing's going to happen, and it won't. So we're all very powerful beings.
What happens to the Vatican and the Church, capital C Church, once we have, if we ever have, full disclosure?
I think it'll collapse, because I think people will realize, well, you don't need to go to a pastor or go to church to be with God. You can be with God every second of every minute of every day. And I think once people realize that they're a divine being, and, you can create anything you like just with the power of your mind, I think, the churches, to me, it's an industry. Churches are industries, to me, I mean, take, for example, Christianity, and this is just my perception, I don't want people to get upset, but if you drink the blood of Jesus and eat his flesh, it's not sounding so good. Now, remember, it's to me. Okay. Then you look at that next line, it says, because of the new covenant. Okay, what's the new covenant? Well, let's have a look at it. Oh, it goes straight back to the Vatican. It's all about sacrifice. And to me, God's not about sacrifice. God loves us unconditionally. So every Sunday, in my opinion, people are doing a ritual, a blood ritual, even though they're not drinking the blood, they're just drinking wine, but it's a ritual. And to me, that's not okay. And I think a lot of these religions have been hijacked to a point where there's a negative influence in the teachings. And I think it's up to us to go with our intuition. The only truth I think everyone has is your own intuition. Does this feel right? No. Well, let's not do it then. And I think that's very important, and that's why I do healings, not because I'm a guru or anything else. I don't believe in gurus. I believe everyone is their own guru. And I do healings to release trauma, get the vibration up so people can take their power back and be their own guru self. And I think that's important to me at this time on this planet.
So let's talk about history, truth, and healing. Tell us more about it. What's it about?
Well, it looks at all manufactured diseases, all those diseases, HIV/AIDS, Agent Orange, Morgellons, Lyme disease. They're all stealth pathogens. What are they? Well, helical bacterial structures that replicate. I mean, pathogens are things like Epstein-Barr, herpes simplex, and things like that. Stealth pathogens are, Borrelia, Lyme, HIV/AIDS, Agent Orange. They actually replicate the body exponentially, and the damage they do, the co-infections like Babesia, Bartonella, and all these things, they really affect the body. Now, Morgellons is different. Morgellons is based on particles that are 10 to the -9 small, nanotechnology. And what they've done, again, it's grey reticular information. They gave us the technology, and you can build particles 10 to the -9 small. So how do they work? Well, there's two types of particles. One is where it's a graphene tube, and the graphene tubes have complementary metal oxide transistor arrays like computers in them, so they can transmit and receive frequencies. And they're also bound with Borrelia, which is the stealth pathogen, Lyme, and various other things like nylons and silicates. So and these things grow, So I'll talk about the growth in a minute. And they also have spheres as well, graphene spheres. And what they've done is, it's like having a football. They've drilled 92 holes in it. They've got little triggers to the center to an antenna, and they're loaded with various, pathogens and different things, so that one frequency can release one pathogen or, disease. So if there's 92, they're not good. And so they've used these as like bioweapons. So it's become very interesting. So how do these things grow? Well, what do you need for growth? Well, you need carbon. So graphene's carbon. You need oxygen, and you need warmth, and it's got all that. So these things grow through the body, they replicate. And the bindings, you might think, well, hang on, nylon, what's nylon? Well, there's different elements of nylon. A shirt is nylon 9. Nylon 36 and 33 is bound to the particles, where that starts growing like through the arteries. So you get nylon in your arteries and all these things. So it's pretty horrific, and we have a protocol for actually stripping it out. The only way you can strip it out is we use timeline splitting and strip it out, separate it out using timeline splitting. We have a protocol for that.
Timeline splitting, how does that work?
Well, the Melchisedek beings were responsible for creating the Akashic records. Why do they do that? Well, they knew one day on this planet you'd have time machines. And so with the Akashic records, they can't get away from that. It's integrated into the whole third dimensional world. So what happens is if you go back on your timeline to, say you go back to 1936, you see Hitler over there, you can observe, but you can't change anything because Hitler's timeline's already happened. So that stopped people from changing the time-space continuum here. Because you can imagine if you took out Hitler, what would happen to the time-space right now? It would be completely destroyed. It would go south. So it stops all that from happening. But in the future, you have infinite timelines. Like, you could go out and I want to be a hairdresser tomorrow. So you got on the hairdressing timeline. I want to do my divine timeline. And for me, I feel as though I'm on a divine timeline. I'm doing healings for people, service to others. I'm sure you feel as though you're on the same, doing podcasts. I think it's brilliant. So we're not in the corporate system. We're not in the matrix per se. So what we do is split the person's timeline in two, put them on a path of divine alignment, complete wellness, where all the particles and the stealth pathogen, everything is out of the body. On the other timeline, we separate all that out, the particles and the stealth pathogens, and we lock it on a timeline to the sun. So as time goes on, it starts to separate the body. It's amazing.
Remarkable. Do you think Morgellons is somehow related to HARP?
It is, yeah. It's interesting because I remember we had a nurse. I work with a world-leading toxicologist, Dr. Hildy. She's absolutely a genius. She's retired now because they've tried to take her out so many times, about 26 times. Yeah, I've had enough. But I remember a nurse, and Dr. Hildy used to check at the time when HARP wasn't around. What was happening is they're using satellite frequencies, and this poor girl had Morgellons. And every night, her whole body would heat up, and the stuff would go crazy because it was being triggered by gigahertz, late gigahertz to terahertz frequencies, satellite frequencies. And so what Hildy had to do is build a Faraday cage for her, which has got to be half wavelength so that it blocks out the frequency. So, yeah, and now HARP, her HARP's being affected. And don't forget, these particles are actually in the sky. That it's not just aluminum and barium, strontium. You've also got Morgellons particles in there, and also in the bioweapon that have been given people. So it's, a lot of people have got it, because if these particles come out of the sky and sit on you, they'll actually go through your skin. They're so small. So everyone's got particles, but not everyone gets Morgellons. Not everyone gets Lyme disease. Not everyone gets HIV. Why is that? Because it depends, to me, it depends on your DNA. If your DNA is robust, therefore RNA, therefore immune system is robust. And then you get the immune response, so it can't replicate. But what happens if you use this new thing called CRISPR technology, or you ingest agrobacterium in GMO foods or in past vaccines and things? What happens is that it damages the DNA, and therefore the immune response disappears, and so it starts to grow through the body. And that's one of the interesting things, we've found out. So, of course, after about 10 weeks on this protocol, you have to invoke a DNA change where psychic surgery-wise, they go in the cell where life began, repair the chromosomes, connect the helix together, and reset the DNA of that cell back to the blueprint that you're meant to be in the Akashic records, then the cells around it, and that takes about 10 weeks. And then your immune is then robust, and it won't happen again.
Yeah, Christopher, if people want to learn more about the good ETs, the bad ETs, manufactured diseases, the Galactic Federation, where do they go?
Yeah, if you want to go to globalenlightenmentproject.com, and there's plenty of information. There's also meditations, there's healings available. We also do 2 healings a week where it's by donation. If you have no money, please come on, because that's why I do it. And that's Thursday night, 5 p.m. Central Time, and Saturday, 11 a.m. Central Time.
globalenlightenmentproject.com. I'll put a link in the episode description. And again, the new book is History, Truth, and Healing, HIV, AIDS, Agent Orange, Gulf War Syndrome, Morgellons, and Lyme Disease. How do we get a copy?
Yeah, you can just go to the website. We've got copies here. And if you, and I would encourage buy them through the ministry, not on Amazon, because of course, there's nothing left when you actually sell things on Amazon. So, but if you can buy it through the ministry, that'd be great, And it's a very interesting read, and it talks about the whole thing, the whole manufactured disease process.
Christopher, great to speak with you. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, thanks, Richard. Bless your heart. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. Welcome once again to another episode of Strange Planet, and it is a far stranger planet than we can possibly comprehend. And on this episode, the royal family and the occult. But before we get to that conversation, just a friendly reminder, if you'd like to get a little deeper into Strange Planet, you might want to consider becoming a premium subscriber. And it's real easy to do. Just click on the link in the episode notes, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm. You get access to commercial-free listening, special bonus episodes produced exclusively for premium subscribers, and you also receive my monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm. All right, a number of things happening for you royal watchers that has led to a lot of speculation and a lot of rumors and some conspiracy theories. It's all very, very compelling stuff. And we're going to begin with the royal portrait of King Charles III that was unveiled on May the 14th at Buckingham Palace. It had been sort of unveiled previously at Highgrove back in 2021 before the coronation. That was the family residence of then Prince Charles and Princess Camilla. But now it's been formally unveiled, and it is causing quite a stir, to say the least. We're going to get into that right now with a good friend of the program. Isaac Weishaupt is the founder of Illuminati Watcher and host of the very popular Occult, Symbolism, and Pop Culture podcast, and has written many, many books. They're all in the episode notes as well. The Dark Path Conspiracies, several volumes of Aliens, UFOs, and the Occult, Use Your Illusion, Volume 1, the Kubrick's Code, the Star Wars Conspiracy, and many, many others. Isaac, welcome back. How are you, buddy?
Hey, Richard, thanks for having me back on. This is one of those interesting situations that seems to fit into my wheelhouse because, as you know, I study the occult philosophies and religions, and try to find how the philosophies and symbolism and ideas show up in our pop culture. And this King Charles III painting came out, and everyone's talking about it. There's some strange symbolism we can talk about. We can talk about the artist who is known for putting symbolism in his artwork, and this just runs parallel to everything I've been into since I started blogging, writing books, and podcasting so many years ago. So I'm thrilled to be back on your show to talk about it. So thank you.
Well, I knew this would be right in your wheelhouse. In fact, my new executive producer here at Strange Planet is the mighty Aphrodite, and she said when that portrait was unveiled, and people were showing that if you take, I think, if you copied that portrait 4 times and kind of flip things around and line them up, you see Baphomet, the goat-headed god. She said, "Oh my God, you have to get Isaac Weishaupt on the program." So we made it happen, and thank you for being here. So let's talk about the official portrait, the first official portrait of King Charles, again unveiled officially at Buckingham Palace on May the 14th. And if you're just listening to the podcast, the audio version, you might want to consider at some point checking out the Rumble version with video, because we're going to be posting inserting some images there. If you're just listening on audio, we'll try and draw some mental images, but I'm sure many of you have already seen the official portrait. So just explain, just give us a kind of an overview of what we see when we see the portrait itself before we get into some of the hidden images.
The portrait itself, people will notice immediately. It's, obviously King Charles III, and the background is just sort of bathed in red, and there's a monarch butterfly. And a lot of these are typical symbols that we talk about with all of the, theories about the Illuminati and how they operate. And this, I mean, just to give a sort of very brief primer on why any of this matters, or how this even works, symbolism is a tool that speaks to the subconscious of the viewer. And this goes back to psychoanalysts like Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, and his nephew Edward Bernays, who was the king of propaganda. He was the guy who, corporate America hired on to convince people that diamond engagement rings should be a thing, because before that they didn't use diamonds for engagement rings. He's the one who convinced us that we needed to have bacon and eggs for breakfast. He's the one who got women to start smoking. They called them torches of freedom. And there's all this sort of propaganda that Edward Bernays utilized. And that's kind of the most sort of, I don't know if rational is the right term, but it's the most rational real world example of how symbolism really does affect us. And the elites, the thought leaders, the people behind this quote unquote Illuminati, they understand that all these things are very powerful, and this is important to their agenda. And then, you could do separate shows arguing what is the agenda, and that's kind of the $1 million question. But for now, we can focus on the symbolism of this King Charles III painting. And when you tear it apart and try to look at it with an open mind, you've got this symbolism of blood, you've got potential symbolism of magic, Twin Peaks, Project Monarch, mind control operations, all kinds of stuff is actually in here if you take a look at it from that angle. And it's interesting to me because this is back, because I'm American. I know very little about the royal family's history and all this, but this took me back to my first book I wrote back in 2012. And one of the major topics in that book was the murder of Princess Diana, with the idea being that if that happened, that just goes to show that we, as the public, what they call the profane, were part of some kind of ritual that we can't be let behind the scenes. So that's why a lot of people like me, we overanalyze and take a look at stuff like this with a very critical lens. And another piece of supporting evidence as to why we should even consider these theories is because the artist himself who painted it, Jonathan Yao, he was known for doing portraits of political leaders like George Bush or Sarah Palin, and he
Tony
made
Blair.
Tony Blair, yeah. He made their portraits, and several of them, like George Bush, he had cut up images from um uh adult content magazines, right? And that was a play on, he was saying that there was a moral superiority to the extreme right wing of American politics. So he used conservative politicians like Bush and Sarah Palin and Arnold Schwarzenegger even, and sort of put these adult images on there. And he had done several portraits, including Tony Blair, which was controversial because he depicted Blair wearing a poppy, which is supposed to be a symbol for the remembrance of how, terrible war is, implying that Tony Blair was a warmonger, because this was back in, when George Bush, after 9/11, and got into the Middle East and all that stuff.
Right. Weapons of mass destruction, which didn't exist. And so
Right. Right. It's like we keep reliving these similar patterns.
So he has kind of a sardonic, Jonathan Yao, the artist, has kind of a sardonic sense of humor and uses hidden images sometimes to take the mickey out of his subjects. So again, the what he sees as the moral rectitude, moral superiority of some on the conservative Christian right, let's say, he'll sort of hide images that belies that. It shows the hypocrisy, maybe.
Yes, and his father was a conservative British politician, which oftentimes you'll see this kind of, I don't know, 180 degrees opposing polarity come through with a parent who's a conservative and the child is a liberal, like Jim Morrison from The Doors, right? His father was a Navy admiral, part of the infamous Gulf of Tonkin false flag, and then Jim Morrison, obviously very much like a leftist hippie kind of guy. But the point is that this guy 100% puts symbolism and messages into his paintings, which, begs the question why people still would go to this guy when he kind of does this stuff. But that's neither here nor there. But he does for sure have symbolism in his painting. So we have to take a look at the symbolism. And the one that stands out when you look at this painting is this monarch butterfly that appears in the painting. And officially, if you look at the facts of how this thing was put together, or the facts of what they presented to the public, the idea actually came from King Charles himself. And if you go to the artist Jonathan Yao's website, he says that the butterfly approaching King Charles's shoulder in the portrait adds a layer of narrative depth, symbolizing both his known advocacy for environmental causes and his personal transformation. The monarch
metamorphosis, right? A butterfly represents metamorphosis, change.
Right. And I do think that, in fact, he even says that. He says the butterfly is the symbol of metamorphosis and rebirth, and it parallels the king's transition from prince to monarch during the period, because he started painting it while he was Prince Charles, right?
Yeah.
And the BBC elaborated on this a little bit more, and what happened was, apparently Jonathan Yao was talking to the king, and he asked him, when school children are looking at this in 200 years and they're looking at the who's who of the monarchs, what clues can you give them? And Charles's response was, what about a butterfly landing on my shoulder? So all sort of surface level arguments for this symbol are, it's just a symbol for metamorphosis and rebirth, like the monarch butterfly. But another idea, if you want to put on the more conspiratorial lens, is the idea of MK Ultra mind control programming.
Project Monarch. Yeah.
And Project Monarch, and MK Ultra had, we obviously don't know everything that happened with MK Ultra. We know it ran for about 20 years until they got caught. The FBI was running this, or the CIA, excuse me. And I believe it was Ed Helms was the guy running it. And once it got sort of leaked that the CIA was conducting experiments unknowingly on its own citizens, they started burning and getting rid of all the documents. And then eventually they sort of took it to the to be exposed in a court of law. And what we do know is that there were multiple sub programs investigating various things, including the paranormal, But one of those supposed projects is a Project Monarch program. And this comes by way of Kathy O'Brien. She wrote about this in her book, Transformation of America. And in the book, she talks about how Project Monarch was a trauma based mind control where she lost control over her own free will and thoughts. And she says right in the book, I'm going to read two sentences here. She says, those who controlled my mind and ultimately my actions claimed to be aliens, demons, and gods. But it was my experience that these perpetrators of the New World Order controls were and are bound by fully human confines despite their terror tactic claims and illusion. The true laws of nature and the laws of man indeed do apply to them. Project Monarch, which is what she said she was subjected to, Project Monarch was a mind control operation which was recruiting multi-generational incest abused children with multiple personality disorder for its genetic mind control studies. I was a prime candidate, a chosen one. And you see symbolism of this in, like, for instance, I'm doing a presentation in Las Vegas, quick plug for that, June 22nd in Las Vegas, about Stanley Kubrick and his final film, Eyes Wide Shut. And when you look at Stanley Kubrick's films, like The Shining, in The Shining, on the surface level, when people watch it, they think, well, it's about this guy played by Jack Nicholson who is physically abusive towards his son, Danny. But if you look at it on this sort of subconscious level or hidden level, I should say, what they're really showing us is possible multi-generational incest abuse children, which is Danny in this case. Because, for instance, when Jack is at the Overlook in the lobby, he's reading a Playgirl magazine. And Stanley Kubrick was an obsessive guy. This guy didn't mistakenly put things in his film. He was notorious for the stuff like when he filmed Eyes Wide Shut. He filmed it in London because he left America in the 60s and never came back. He filmed it in London, but he flew personnel to America, to the streets of New York, to measure the newspaper stands on the sidewalks because he wanted to recreate the set. I mean, the guy was like obsessed with this stuff. So to see a Playgirl magazine, which for people who don't know, it's a magazine that had nude men in it. Jack Nicholson's reading this casually in the Overlook, and when you zoom in on it, you find that there's an article on the front cover about incest abused children. And then when you look at some of the other symbolism of The Shining, with the teddy bear, with the Danny who's got this dissociative identity disorder problem, he speaks to Tony, this alter ego of his. You could argue, and then on top of all that, when Danny's in the day room in this one scene, if you look at the back wall, there's a poster and it says Monarch on it. Now, this movie was filmed a long time ago. This is before Kathy O'Brien wrote the book. This was before MK Ultra was known to the public.
Well, though, a little bit of it came out during the church committee in the committee hearings in the, what was that, 1976 or something? A little bit.
Yeah, maybe there was some overlap. You might be right. Yeah. So I don't know whether Kubrick knew about it or not, but he zoomed in on this, and the argument here, I would say, is that Danny is quite possible an explanation for how this works, and this all goes back to the Nazi scientists. But after World War II, in Operation Paperclip, we brought a bunch of Nazi scientists over, and they were doing all kinds of experimentation over there that was in this sort of ballpark. The Lebensborn eugenics programs, and this is where, okay, so let me zoom back out because I don't want to go too far deep down that rabbit hole. But the idea we're presenting is that perhaps King Charles III's butterfly, this monarch butterfly, doesn't mean metamorphosis and rebirth. Maybe it's showing participation on some level of this MK Ultra Project Monarch. And what ties us into that is the royal family's connections to the Nazis, who were doing stuff just like this. We bring them over to America in Operation Paperclip, and then what do you know? The CIA is doing very similar kinds of studies.
Right. You have Prince Philip, who was closely associated with Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who was a member of the SS. And I believe, now let me see, who was it? Was it Prince Philip's sisters that married into the Hess family? So yeah, and we all know about, Prince David, who became King Edward VIII, who abdicated, and he was courting Adolf Hitler. So there is a connection there for sure.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I like I said, I'm not super well versed on the history of the royals, but fun fact, I almost got into a fight with a relative of Rudolf Hess. There was a guy in the military I was with, and we were really close friends, and we got into a lot of heated arguments. And anyways, he was related to Rudolf Hess, but Prince Philip, his sister married a prominent Nazi, and that's where there's footage of Prince Philip walking, or doing the what do you call it, I don't know if goose stepping is the right term, but in the Nazi uniform, because he was attending one of his sister's funerals. And then just recently, a few years ago, Queen Elizabeth, she somehow was caught on film back in the 30s, doing a Nazi salute, and she had to apologize for that before she passed away. And then Prince Harry supposedly went to a birthday party wearing like a brown shirt uniform with the logo on the sleeve. And I was just like, I mean, who goes to a birthday party dressed up? Because I thought it was a Halloween party when I started researching, because I remembered it. But anyways, there's this sort of rich history of connection there. And so, the question is Project Monarch a real thing? I mean, according to Kathy O'Brien, it is. And given that there was, documented dozens and dozens of sub programs in the MK Ultra experiments, I'd have to side with the idea that, yes, I think Project Monarch was real on some levels.
And of all the symbols to demonstrate your interest in the environment, I suppose you could pick a monarch butterfly, but you could also pick, I don't know, a deer, a baby deer, a fawn. You could pick a tree. You could pick, I don't know, about a million things to represent, nature and the environment. But he picked a monarch, not just any butterfly. I mean, you could pick about a thousand probably different butterflies. He chose a monarch butterfly, which is interesting. Isaac Weishaupt is with us. We'll take a quick time out and come back, and we'll talk more about the official portrait of King Charles III. Stay with us. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. Isaac Weishaupt is here, founder of Illuminati Watcher and host of the Occult, Symbolism, and Pop Culture podcast. How do we listen to the podcast, Isaac?
Yeah, it's available on pretty much every platform. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts. I have a YouTube channel, but I don't update it super often because I have all these issues with YouTube. But yeah, you can stream the podcast everywhere. And then I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Illuminati Watcher. Is where you can get the ad-free version of the feed. I do bonus episodes constantly for the supporters. And yeah, it's been a fun journey podcasting. So yeah, subscribe to my podcast, everybody. It's really good.
And you've been lately doing a deep dive into Twin Peaks, a television show.
That's right. It's quite the obsession of mine. I'm having a real issue, and this is, to me, it supports all the years of research, I only started watching Twin Peaks about a year and a half ago, and I've been deep diving into it on my supporter feeds. I go through every single episode, the books. We're still on that journey. I believe we're almost done with season 2 on the Patreon feed, but or Apple Premium. I'm on the Apple Premium if you got the Apple Podcast app, where you can get all the same stuff. But it's interesting because Twin Peaks is definitely a case study in how symbolism pulls the viewer into the ritual of the entertainment. Because I have this, I mean, it's a really long time to get to how this theory works that I talk about on my Twin Peaks Grey Lodge episodes. But the idea is that David Lynch, who practices transcendental meditation, and in that transcendental meditation, he makes contact with the unified field, which is where a lot of these theories of consciousness and symbolism and how it speaks to us on the subconscious level, it's where a lot of this stuff comes from. So I think he literally came in contact with this unified field and knew how to bake symbolism into his show, and without revealing anything, because I know some people haven't seen all of season 2 yet, there's examples of how he pulls the viewer in. It's very nefarious if you dig into it. But yeah, it's my latest obsession. And in fact, Twin Peaks symbolism is found on this painting as well, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, we're talking about the Jonathan Yao official portrait of King Charles III that was unveiled, the first official portrait since his coronation as King of England. And it was unveiled at Buckingham Palace, although it was unveiled, I guess, privately for the family at in Highgrove. That's the family residence for Prince Charles and Princess Camilla. But now that he's been coronated, it's been officially unveiled. And you've got the king in his Welsh Guard uniform, and the background just this very bold red, blood red paint. And then you've got the monarch butterfly, which we discussed earlier, over one of his shoulders. So yeah, let's talk about maybe some of the Twin Peak symbolisms that we find in the portrait.
Yeah, there's a couple of fun sort of side symbols. There was one of a shoulder pin that he's wearing, and it looks like a bee, but I did some research. It turns out it's just British aviation wings. It says he got his wings back in 1971 for his military service. And what was interesting about his military service in the Navy, he was on 3 ships. He was on the HMS Minerva, the HMS Jupiter, and the HMS Hermes. And these are all very symbolic in the realm of the occult. Minerva is the goddess of wisdom, which ties us into so many things. It ties us into owls, Bohemian Grove, Gnosticism, Athena, and all this stuff. And Minerva is also the I believe it's the first grade of initiation in the Bavarian Illuminati back when that was a secret society. Then you've got HMS Jupiter, which is, astrological alignments. We're talking about Saturn and Jupiter come up oftentimes in entertainment, particularly in Twin Peaks. There's a whole theme line about the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter opening up a gateway. You also see it in Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, because in the film, Commander David Bowman heads out to Jupiter to become enlightened. But in the book written by Arthur C. Clarke, he actually heads out to Saturn. That's what it was originally intended to be. Supposedly, he had a difficult time recreating the rings of Saturn. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but that's the official history of why Kubrick didn't use Saturn. But what's interesting, if you read the 3 Arthur C. Clarke novel sequels to 2001, you find this journey of mankind going through this sort of alchemical transformation into digital consciousness, which is what the elites want. They want to sort of trap us in a digital matrix. And part of the plot line, the monoliths from 2001, they gain mass on the planet Jupiter till it implodes and becomes a star. And what do they name this star? They name it Lucifer, because that's what these elites are all about. They're all about this weird Luciferian death cult stuff. So anyways, and then the HMS Hermes is also, that's where alchemy comes from. This Hermes Trismegistus character in mythology supposedly was this ancient Egyptian deity that come and taught man all these secrets of alchemy and how we could sort of recreate life in a way. So anyway, if it was a bee, which it's not, just to be clear, it's a aviation wings, but it looks like a bee to me at first glance, because a bee is a symbol of magic. That's again a very occult idea.
Right.
But the
Wasn't
belt,
the bee is long been associated with royal families as well? Weren't the Merovingians, if I'm pronouncing that correctly? This was the Frankish uh, royals, who some believe were descendants of, for those who believe in, Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, and their bloodline was involved in the Merovingians, and they used the symbol of the bee, didn't they?
yeah, that's right. I think it was King Childeric or something like that. Again, I'm not the smartest guy on other people's history, but he was buried in a suit of bees. And yeah, the symbol that you see, um I can't think of the name off the top of my head. It's the symbol you see oftentimes in like New Orleans. Anyways, it's supposed to
Fleur de lis.
represent
The fleur de lis.
the fleur de lis. There you go. Yeah, the fleur de lis. I think that's based upon the idea of a bee and the Merovingians and all that
Ah,
stuff.
cool.
Yeah, another big can of worms. But again, it's not a bee, but just for fun, I thought it was at the beginning. But to look at the belt of King Charles, there's a pattern on there, and that pattern is a sort of you'll see a black zigzag line, and that is, again, just for fun, that's the flooring on the Red Room in Twin Peaks, which is sort of this mystical dream realm that the characters kind of go into. But yeah, I don't know. Was he trying to say that King Charles watches Twin Peaks? I don't know about that, but just for fun, I did notice that. But the big symbol besides the butterfly is the idea of blood, because this is very important. Uh, in the scheme of pretty much all of these conspiracies about the Illuminati and different bloodlines. If you go to Jonathan Yow's webpage, he says that officially the reason it's red is because that's the uniform color of the Welsh Guards. But same with the U.S. flag. If you look at the U.S. flag, officially the red symbolizes, like bravery or something like that. But in reality, what it really symbolizes is the bloodshed of war, the price of freedom, all these things. So really the symbolism of red does equate to the symbolism of blood and sacrifice and such, right? And if we go down that route of exploring the ideas of the symbolism of blood, you see this as, on the surface level, you could argue that Yao is again being political and saying that, look, England, they're colonizers, and this guy is got the blood on his hands of all these people that they've colonized. Some people say that it's comparing him to the devil and that he's burning in hell and stuff like that. So I've even read some people say that it represents the blood of Princess Diana. Um, on a more fringy note, people say, and this is a little much, but some people say that it represents this controversy that they called it the tampon gate in the British press, because there was a transcript of a conversation between Prince Charles and Camilla
Yes.
back when they were having a secret affair. And some
He,
people say that
yeah, he fantasized about being a tampon, and I'll leave the rest up to people's imaginations.
exactly. And that train of thought is kind of odd too when you consider that Prince Philip was the one who said if he was ever reincarnated, he wanted to come back as a deadly virus to solve the overpopulation issue.
That's right.
Which again, like that's the calling card for how these elites think and how they view humanity is we're a real issue. We're a sort of a virus that needs to be taken care of in a way.
Yeah, they want to return us to sort of a new feudal age, where the kings reign supreme once again, and they're going to herd the great unwashed, that would be you and me, into the large cities where we would be heavily surveilled and controlled, and 15-minute cities. Deep after we're sufficiently culled and depopulated so that we can be managed and controlled, and then they would rewild large tracts of land, huge tracts of wilderness in places like the United States, well, all over the world, And it'd be like back in the days of, lords and vassals where, we're not allowed to hunt on the lord's land. We have to, we have to stay in the city. That's for the rewilded regions in these vast corridors would be for the nobles, right? The elites.
Yeah, and this is all evident in a lot of the Great Reset talk, the World Economic Forum and such. In fact, I was listening to your episode. You had a guest on talking about the environmental sort of agenda and stuff. And I'm not the smartest guy on earth. I've heard arguments on both sides of this thing, and I could see both sides. I'm not a scientist. I don't really know where I stand on it, but I do know whether it's true or not that man is damaging the environment. I mean, that's got to be true on some levels. I do see that, but do we need to take how drastic do these measures need to be? Right. I do think that the powers that be, regardless of whether or not this is a real thing or happening at the level which they say it is, I do think that they want to use that as the way to defend these sort of like 15-minute cities and coffin apartments and all this stuff, because it's been sort of like their laid in plan for a long time. And it's an occult concept too, because Aleister Crowley talked about this in his I think it was Liber Oz was the name of they call it a book, but it's more like a declaration page. And he said the slave shall serve, and that's their attitude of how this works. And the idea of blood, when you get into the occult, they call for blood in a lot of the rituals. Aleister Crowley had a Gnostic mass where he had this mockery of the communion, and in his Gnostic mass communion wafers, the cakes of light, it called for blood. Also, he wrote a book called Magic and Theory and Practice, and I'm going to read a sentence from there. It says, it's talking about the chalice which they use in the ritual. It says, this cup is said to be full of the blood of the saints. That is, every saint or magician must give the last drop of his life's blood to that cup. It is the original price paid for magical powers. And I think that there's something to that. I think that they do subscribe to a Faustian bargain in a way, the idea of a blood sacrifice in exchange for the gods to give them powers. And you see this with Marina Abramovic, who is a very famous artist, and she's had these spirit cooking events. The term blue blood refers to the elites, the royals, meaning they have a special blood, which is their belief system. They believe in this divine right to rule, because they think that they are sort of above us. And you could go into theories about, David Icke had an interesting theory about them being shape-shifting lizard people that I find fascinating. But to stick to the painting, or to wrap up the sort of painting talk, the idea here is that the artist possibly is showing us blood symbolism on this painting. And then this is where it gets subjective. Where does the mind take you? Does it take you to British being colonizers, or does it take you to the idea that they understand that their blood gives them the divine right to rule, and they are sort of special, and they know how to sort of connect magically to some other, higher power?
All right, we'll take another time out. When we come back, we will talk about the sort of the Lollapalooza of all hidden images in this official portrait of King Charles III. Of course, that would be Baphomet. Stay with us. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. Isaac Weishaupt is with us, the founder of Illuminati Watcher, IlluminatiWatcher.com, and the host of the Occult, Symbolism, and Pop Culture podcast. And you can find that everywhere you find your podcasts, IlluminatiWatcher.com for more information. And again, talking about the official portrait of King Charles III unveiled by, or painted by artist Jonathan Yao, unveiled in mid-May. So this idea that if you copy this portrait 4 times and you sort of line them up in a certain way, you will see the image of Baphomet, which is this goat-headed god that is often seen as it's obviously related to Lucifer, right? Baphomet related to,
right. Yeah, and you definitely see the image if you manipulate the painting in the way described. I've seen multiple sort of iterations of this happen on Reddit, and I mean you definitely can see this sort of horned figure that looks very much like the Baphomet, and this is one of the most important symbols in the occult because what the Baphomet represents is the reconciliation of opposites. It's kind of an idea that the occultists have about opposing polarities and duality, because the idea for duality, you know, we think that good and evil are sort of opposing forces, and the occultists, they kind of believe that those are social constructs, and if one was to embrace evil, then that somehow demonstrates that they're not one of the dummies, one of the profane, the masses. They're not falling for these social constructs. That's one theory as to why they do a lot of these horrific things, is because they have to demonstrate that they are above this idea of social constructs and morality and all this kind of thing. But the history of the Baphomet, as far as it being a symbol of the the goat with the male goat with the female breasts, it goes back to the Knights Templar, who were initiated into the Eastern mystic teachings of the assassins in the Middle East, and they worshipped the Baphomet, which they supposedly had a bunch of rituals that they were doing. That's why they got sort of in trouble and shut down, supposedly, because they were doing homosexual rituals. They were spitting on the cross to renounce Christianity, which is odd because they were protecting Christian Christians trying to pilgrims, right? Yeah, to the Holy Land. But supposedly they followed the teachings of the assassins, who were saying that, that we're talking like this is back in like the 1200s, right? 1100s. They were saying that to further the Luciferian agenda, that people should be assimilating to their culture and saying whatever they should say to get into positions of power, which, is arguably why you see a lot of our political leaders who profess to be Christian, but then they do a lot of things that don't seem to line up with that. And it's because they're not really religious. They're just saying what they need to get in office.
Sociopaths, in other words, sociopaths.
Right. And the Knights Templar, they were worshiping what they called the head of Baphomet. And some people say that this is the actual skull of John the Baptist that they had in their possession. But yeah, and this goes, the Knights Templar is a very interesting subject because they were sort of supposedly arrested on Friday the 13th in 1307, and their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stakes for all this sort of heresy, right? And
some say he was crucified.
Yeah, right. And so I think they admire this guy for being burned for his convictions, and later on, fast forward 700 years, and there's this thing called the Order of De Molay, which Walt Disney was a member of, and it was kind of like a I don't know, Freemasonry for teenagers kind of thing. But the occult history of the Baphomet, there it's kind of windy rabbit hole. But Eliphas Levi, who was this French magician, he depicted the Baphomet as a goat with the horns inside of a pentagram, and from him, Anton LaVey utilized this as the symbol for the Church of Satan. They called it the word of the Gnostics because they all subscribe to similar things of ritual magic and Gnosticism and all this stuff. And some of the symbolism you'll see on the Baphomet is on his forearms. It says "solve" and "coagula," and this is an alchemical reference. It means to dissolve and then coagulate, to break apart and then bring back together. And that's the ultimate plan of these elites, is to kind of dissolve the world as we see it and then rebuild it in their image. And of course, when you dig into this, you're like, well, what does that mean even? Why do they not like all this? And I hate to say this, but it comes down to spirituality, and they really dislike, and this is coming from every occult literature I've ever read, from Helena Blavatsky to Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley. They really hated religion, specifically Christianity. They found a real issue with that. And what they advocate for is a rebuilding into a new world order, which is a Luciferian new world order of focus on the self, doing the will of your own. That's what Aleister Crowley's "do what thou wilt" stands for. And it seems like they're headed down this path, and I can't argue against it. It does seem like things are trending in that direction.
For sure, for sure. So do I have that right? If you, how do you arrange the portrait in order to see Baphomet?
I believe what they did was they take one image of the painting, and then they what do you call it, like transpose it horizontally, and then you take that full image and flip it vertically, and then you put those four together. It's kind of hard to explain.
It's a bit of a puzzle. Yeah, I'll do it on the Rumble channel version of the podcast, and people can see it. But did I read? I think Jonathan Yao has done that sort of thing before. Maybe not with Baphomet, but he kind of likes to hide images, and if you arrange his portraits in a certain way, you'll see things.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I believe it. I mean, he obviously was into symbolism in his art, and Dennis Hopper, he hired Jonathan Yao to do his own portrait, and he was kind of a weird dude too. He's connected into a lot of this occult stuff, and even the Manson family on some levels. And but yeah, there's a lot of people that I would argue they utilize this guy because they know that they can, sort of hide something. And the royal family, they're no strangers to controversy. They've been, I'm always suspect of what their intentions are. Like, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they just a few years ago, left I don't know, what do you call it? Left the royal family confines of London, and they came to America, and they pitched this story about how the royals are racist, and and they proceeded to go on about how they just want to be left alone, yet they're on every they've got podcast and Netflix shows, and they're on every morning show. So like, clearly that's not what they're wanting. They're not wanting privacy. But it was interesting because when they moved to their estate in LA, after they moved there was an excavation done by their estate, and they found human remains from 11,000 years ago.
Wow.
Buried there. But yeah, and then you've got the Prince William and Kate Middleton issue, where Kate Middleton is officially, she was gone missing for several months, and officially people demanded to know where she was, and they found out she was, I guess, battling cancer, and
she hasn't been seen in public really since December 2023. There's been some, far off photographs and some video. Not, she wasn't sitting for a publicity photo or anything like that. These were candid. And some people claim that those were manipulated with AI. And there's a lot of rampant speculation about where is Kate Middleton, what's happening with her.
Yeah, they released an image. The Associated Press released an image of her with her kids, and online sleuths sort of figured out that it was AI doctored, and then they had to admit that they did, and that wasn't really her. And then they admitted that she's been fighting cancer, and then they had this video that doesn't even look like her that they say is her. Some theorists claim that she's already dead and that the blood on the painting is actually a symbol for Kate Middleton's blood. Um, and I don't know. Prince Harry and Prince William are the sons of Princess Diana, and like that whole Princess Diana thing is odd. And then Pierce Morgan, just I think it was yesterday, was on a show talking about how he had heard rumors about what's really going on with Kate Middleton, and he said even if a percentage of these rumors are true, it's a real sort of mind-blowing shock. And I don't know what that means, but and then of course you've got Prince Andrew, who was hanging with Epstein. And maybe this is a smokescreen to get people to stop talking about that. I mean, who knows, right?
I don't, did you see someone posted this recently? So dial back to 1968 and the Roman Polanski film Rosemary's Baby, and you have Mia Farrow's character, and she's given birth to the to the Antichrist, or basically, and she doesn't know it, of course, and she's presenting the baby. And so she's got the baby in kind of, all bundled up, swaddled, and she's wearing this red sort of polka dot dress with kind of a lace collar. And then, parallel to that photo on social media, you see a picture of Princess Kate Middleton, when she had her son George presenting him, and she's wearing the exact style of dress from Rosemary's Baby.
Oh wow, yeah, that's pretty wild because the Rosemary's Baby, it fits in line with a lot of these occult ideas of what they call the moon child. Like Aleister Crowley had a novel about these magicians doing a magical working to incarnate a spirit into a golem, basically. And there's also in 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's a star child depicting the evolution of man into something else. And then, Jack Parsons did what they call the Babylon working, again, trying to manifest an entity with which he could create the Antichrist. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess the wild theory could be that she was being used in a sort of ritual to, I don't know, maybe manifest a new I don't know, Luciferian Antichrist, because like I said before, the royals, I mean, they're the ones that claim the divine right to rule. They claim that their bloodline makes them superior to normal human beings. And and this takes us into David Icke's theories, which, the short version is that he claims that there's these hybrid bloodlines that are sort of this genetic, it's kind of like a demigod, a fusion of a human and a god or an entity or an alien or whatever. And this bloodline is into enslaving human beings. And this, you see this kind of thing in Zecharia Sitchin's talks about the Anunnaki and things. But and David Icke is pretty interesting when you read his books. But he says that this bloodline goes back to the Draco constellation, specifically, and he basically says they use human energy for their form of sustenance. So they like pushing fear into population because these emotions, they can feed off of it as a form of sustenance, and with that energy they can sort of manifest in our dimension, and then eventually they need more to sort of pop back into our dimension, which is all fascinating because, again, it ties into Twin Peaks. That's kind of one of the theories about what's going on in Twin Peaks, with the Garmin Bosia kind of storyline. But they they claim to be tied into Vlad the Impaler and Dracula, which, a lot of them say they're related by blood to Dracula.
Prince Charles has admitted that he's sort of proudly proclaimed that a number of times, that he's related to Vlad the Impaler.
Right. So I mean, they tell us all this kind of stuff up front. So it's odd that they wouldn't want us speculating on some of these sort of, sort of dirtier things, because this is all part of the theory that there are certain bloodlines in control of our world. People throw out the names like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the Windsors, which is, your royal family. And this goes back to Babylon and the ideas of demigods walking amongst us, and how they want to sort of create this global domination plan and instill a global Babylon upon us.
All that in one painting. Amazing. All right, Isaac, always fascinating. I always learn so much when you join us. Thank you so much for this. And again, how do we watch or listen to, rather, Occult, Symbolism, and Pop Culture, the podcast?
Oh, thanks for having me back on. You're too kind. I love doing your show. The Occult, Symbolism, and Pop Culture podcast is available on all the apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and such. And you can get the ad-free version of the show with my bonus content, like I'm doing the deep dive into the world of Twin Peaks on the Apple Premium on the app, or patreon.com/Illuminati Watcher.
And the website, all of this is in the episode notes, illuminatiwatcher.com, right?
Yes, that's right. IlluminatiWatcher.com. I started that back in 2011 as a blog. I used to blog about all this stuff, and it got real popular. Then Google shadow banned it. I started podcasting in 2014. It was kind of I was writing books this whole time, but I started podcasting in 2014 as a sort of way to get my message out there, because I also got shut down on YouTube. So yeah, podcasting has been the thing to do, but I kept the website alive, and it's, I post every episode on there now. So yeah, you can find all the details at IlluminatiWatcher.com.
All right. All the best. You have a great spring. And again, the conference coming up in Las Vegas. Let's give that another plug.
Yeah, that's right. I'll be doing a lecture about Stanley Kubrick and the symbolism of his final film, Eyes Wide Shut. I'll be joined by Jay Dyer and Jamie Hanshaw, and it's going to be a great time. We're going to do a meet and greet after. It's on Saturday, June 22nd in Las Vegas. You can get your tickets on eventbrite.com. Just search for Isaac Weishaupt or Jay Dyer. That's probably easier to spell, and I'm sure you can track it down. Or you can go to my Instagram. I've got a link in my bio. Go to Instagram. My profile is Isaac Weishaupt. Good luck spelling it, but that's another way you can find the tickets.
All right. Well, everything is right there in the episode notes. I'll put the Instagram link there as well. Isaac, thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks.
Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there.